In the neon-lit cityscape of Cloudbank, where reality can be changed at whim by the people's voice, a silent songstress stands over a blade, until that silence is finally broken.
Hey, Red. We're not gonna get away with this, are we?
Without much choice, Red pulls the sword from the man's body and is off seeking answers and seeking revenge. Welcome to the world of Transistor, a 2D action game with an isometric camera developed by Supergiant Games, the developers of Hades, a 2D action roguelike game with an isometric camera. Transistor was the studio's second game, developed after the critical success of Bastion, a 2D action game with an isometric camera. Listen, when it works, there's really no reason to change. Transistor is an important game for Supergiant Games. While a studio's first game is important for showcasing the capabilities of a studio, it's the second game that can set the pace for future releases. If the second game is a dud, then the studio could be perceived as a one-hit wonder, with only one reliable IP to work from. And doubters and skeptics would undoubtedly hold this failure over the studio's head. But if they make a second, successful game, well then, they're the makings for a potential powerhouse of a studio. Early conceptualizing for Transistor began in September of 2011, about 2 months after the release of Bastion. Instead of going the sequel route and making a Bastion 2, the small team of 12 wanted to do something very unlike Bastion. Their thought process was that they didn't want to be known as the Bastion studio, so they hoped to make a game that would be able to assert its own identity, distinct from Bastion. And they roughly knew what they wanted to do, a sci-fi love story with tactical elements. But that was about all they really had. The characters, world, music, metagaming, voiceover, everything struggled. Part of the issue was that there was this invisible pressure that Bastion had placed on them. It's kind of a suffering from success issue. The bar was set so high thanks to the numerous awards that Bastion had won. Because they had hoped to create something distinct for Bastion, they didn't want to use anything that Bastion had done. Even the things that people really liked. Even something like the camera angle took months as they tweaked the various angles, only to settle on a camera angle that was very similar to Bastion's. And the story similarly had issues. Originally, the protagonist of Transistor was supposed to be a man known as the Boxer, who was going to be guided by the spirit on his journey of revenge after the death of his girlfriend. But things were just not coming together in quite the way that they liked. It was only after a car trip back from E3 where discussions about a different story, a story about a tavern girl falling in love with a traveling wizard who gets attacked by a group with a demonic sword, did the story finally find its direction, this time with Red as the protagonist. So what is Transistor about? The story focuses on a songstress, Red, who is attacked by a group calling themselves the Camerata. When they attempt to use the transistor to strike her, a man steps between the two and takes the hit. And in the scuffle, the group loses the sword, Red loses her voice, and the man loses his life. But that is when the sword begins to speak.
Hey, Red. We're not gonna get away with this, are we?
The man who had protected Red, nicknamed the Boxer, was absorbed into the transistor. And together, they attempt to escape only to find that there are robots known as the Process deconstructing the city and are attempting to destroy them too. The combat of this game is very interesting. Red is able to slot 4 moves known as functions to act as her combat moves, and these can be augmented further using unused functions. For example, you can put a bounce function on your attack to make it hit multiple enemies, or a crash function to make enemies more vulnerable. But one of the most important parts of the game's combat is the turn bar. Red is able to briefly stop time and plan out her attacks, repositioning if necessary and queuing certain actions to use in quick succession and take out enemies rapidly. But after using the turn bar, you're unable to attack until the turn bar recharges. It's this kind of pseudo turn-based style where fights flip between the player turn and the enemy turn. But the functions also serve a dual purpose. Each of these functions provide information about a citizen in Cloudbank that was a target for the Camerata. And there are multiple terminals that you can find throughout the city that give you a sense of Cloudbank. The city operates as a pure democracy. All matters are put to a vote, and all citizens vote to determine how they want things in the city to be run, from whether a bridge is built, all the way to what they want the weather to be that day. And the citizens of this town are able to pursue their passions freely.
Hi. You turn left. Thought we were gonna skip town. We're going back there.
Instead of choosing to flee the city, Red decides to seek answers from the Camerata. Why was she attacked? What are those things destroying the city? What do they want? With plenty of questions to still be answered, she returned to where everything began, the concert hall. A solitary mic in an empty hall, and a singer without a voice. Quite ironic, isn't it? Red recalls the moments that led to this moment. The attack, the fear, the loss. Everything is the Camerata's fault. And when she opens her eyes, a monstrous version of Sybil, one of her attackers, is behind her, and thus begins the first boss battle of the game. Sybil is an interesting person in the world of Transistor. She's an elite who organized events in Cloudbank, and it was her sociability that made her perfect as a spy for the Camerata. She was responsible for selecting the targets for the organization. Then, Sybil met Red. Sybil was infatuated with Red, but the feeling wasn't mutual. The more Red tried to keep her distance from Sybil, the more desperate Sybil got to get closer to her. In seeing the relationship that Red had with the boxer, Sybil decided that Red would be the next target for the Camerata. Red's feelings for Sybil can be understood from the song that plays in the background of this fight, In Circles. The beginning of the song gives the listener Red's impression of Sybil. She's a fly, annoying and a bother, looking for an opportunity with Red. And Red sees what Sybil has become and recognizes the pain that she is in. But the song also exposes Red in the second verse.
Maybe you're looking for someone to blame, fighting for air while you circle the drain. Never be sorry for your little time. It's not when you get there, it's always a climb.
Sybil blames Red for everything that is happening. When she picked up the transistor, the process went berserk. But Red also puts blame on herself. Red has survivor's guilt. The man she loved is gone because the Camerata were after her. If not for her, the boxer would still be alive. At least, that's what she believes. She wears his jacket because that's all that is left of him. But in the end, there's only one way for this fight to end. Red ends Sybil's suffering and integrates her into the transistor, and she reveals a location the next two members of the Camerata. So off we go once more. Music is an important aspect in Transistor. With Red being a singer, having a way to convey that was important. At certain key moments in the game, a song will play that has lyrics sung by Red, implying either that these are songs that Red had already composed and are in her discography, or she created them on the spot and we are hearing some sort of internal voice singing. We even hear Red humming when she plans her attacks. If you have time, I highly recommend that you listen to the soundtrack. It has some of the best music from Supergiant. Where were we again? Alright, Revenge. Anyways, Giant Serpent. Dubbed the spine of the world, this giant process seems to have a negative effect on the transistor, causing the boxer to become delirious. Red temporarily puts a pause on hunting the Camerata to destroy this process and crush its heart. Coincidentally, we're pretty close to the next two members of the Camerata, Grant and Asher Kendrell. Grant was an administrator for the city of Cloudbank. But what good is an administrator in a city that automatically runs itself? I don't know, man. Sounds like a pretty sweet deal. It's a paycheck, just chill out, right? Meanwhile, Asher was a writer for the news. Grant and Asher are married given their shared last name and their dissimilar appearances. The developers noted that while the institution of marriage may not exist in Cloudbank, the Kendrill's marriage is as canon as anything. Anyways, they're dead. Yeah, it turns out they just kind of took their own lives waiting for you to get there. As you were going up to meet them, Asher was sending you messages expressing regret for a lot of their actions. They didn't want things to turn out this way, and it is here that they also elaborate on what they wanted. The Camerata are fed up with the way that Cloudbank ran. Their motto was, when everything changes, nothing changes. Which feels like a paradox, but there's some reasoning to it. Because the city was ruled by a pure democracy where everyone had a vote, and could one day desire a bridge to be built and the next day decide that they wanted it to be a theater instead, it meant that Cloudbank would always be subject to fickle decision making. Nothing was permanent. Why bother working on any project or idea if people could just undo all that work the next day? The Camerata hoped that they could take control of Cloudbank by seizing the Transistor and thus control over the process. 3 down, 1 to go. Royce is located back near where we first started the game. And retracing our steps all the way back, we see just how much damage the process done to Cloudbank in relatively a short time. And after meeting Royce through a proxy, he guides us to the central nervous system of the process, the cradle, the place where the Transistor can control the process. However, when the Transistor is inserted, Red and Royce are caught in the blast and pulled into the Transistor.
Let's see. The good news. Well, the process, I think we got it. Contained it. So, the town is going to be all right. It's just, well, someone's going to have to rebuild. But we flew a little close to the flame there, so now we're here, not there. We're stuck. And unfortunately, the only way back that I'm aware of is, well, unpleasant. So let's get this over with.
With Royce defeated, Red is able to free herself from the Transistor and has full control over the process. With this new power, she's able to rebuild all that was destroyed, in whatever manner she chooses. But what is the point of rebuilding Cloudbank when everything and everyone that Red held dear is gone? In the final moments of the game, Red sits down next to the one she loves,
Don't you do it.
lifts the Transistor, and
Don't do this. Please. If you do this. Red, please don't. Wait. Red! Red. No, Red. What did you do? No, Red, no. No.
when I first played Transistor, it was 2018. It was my first game from Supergiant and is probably one of my favorite games too. But I couldn't put my finger on why for the longest time. But I think I get it. A lot of games try to force you to feel a certain way about the characters and their relationship to each other and the world. How many times have you had a game try to make you feel bad for a character and you just didn't give a shit? Or you never felt that way with Transistor. At least, not with Red and the Boxer. Supergiant wanted to make a love story in a cyberpunk world. And it's these little moments between the two that really help sell their love for each other. And the ending, showing these moments between the two before this entire mess happened, feels very believable when juxtaposed next to what we saw from them in the game. It was the perfect way to end this game.
Hi.
Hey.
Okay, that was the perfect ending.